Welcome to the Heart Wide Open Wellness Podcast, where we explore therapy, Kundalini Yoga, and all things holistic wellness. I'm Hannah Zachney, LMFT, International Retreat Leader, and Curious Human. Whether you're tuning into us via social media or any of the major podcast platforms, we're so grateful to have you here. Here's to opening our hearts and exploring life together. Welcome to the Heart Wide Open Wellness Podcast. Here we focus on helping others through therapy. We do trauma work, brain spotting, EMDR. We also host international retreats and have a women's membership. We are also doing this podcast. And today we are going to be welcoming Faun O'Neel. And I would love to just introduce her as how I know you and just from a personal note. And then I will read her very generous bio that just explains so much of what she's accomplished in this beautiful life of hers. But Faun and I were introduced really through my husband, who is a disabled veteran. He served 22 years in the Marine Corps, and Faun has also stood by her husband, who also served, and she will be able to share more of that. But they also have a organization, which we're going to talk about today, and it's Warfighter Overwatch, and it's a wonderful service. So we met through them, and really, truly, my husband just immediately said, "You need to meet this woman." We share the same entrepreneurial problems.
Yes.
Which, recently I was told that people that have that entrepreneurial addiction have a deep, insatiable need to serve. And
All right.
that felt good.
That definitely is something I connect with.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I knew you would. So aside from all the wonderful things I could say about her, she has become a friend and somebody that I'm happy to have in my world. And thank you for your time today.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Professionally, here we go. So Faun O'Neel's profound impact and unwavering dedication to the veteran, caregiver, and first responder communities is evident in her tireless efforts and personal sacrifices. As a mother of 4 children, including 2 adopted from foster care, Faun's compassionate heart has also welcomed and nurtured 20 foster children over a 5-year period. Her resilience was further tested when her youngest daughter, born extremely premature, faced significant health challenges, enduring multiple surgeries and years of intensive care. Faun's journey into caregiving deepened as she supported her husband, U.S. Army Sergeant Danny O'Neill, through his post-service struggles, including PTSD, TBI, and other injuries sustained during his military services, which included 2 back-to-back tours in Iraq. Thank you, Danny, and you, Faun. With a background in political science, Faun combines her firsthand experience and academic knowledge to advocate effectively for veterans' issues, mental health, suicide prevention, and navigating the complexities of the VA system. That's not easy to do. Harnessing her expertise and driven by a desire to fill critical gaps in support, Faun founded Warfighter Overwatch in 2020. As its executive director, she has been instrumental in creating and implementing programs that directly address the urgent needs of first responders, veterans, and their families. Her leadership has transformed Warfighter Overwatch with a vital conduit connecting individuals with the resources they require. Her personal motto, "No barriers to treatment for you or your family," means that Faun will find resources for those who need it. Under Faun's guidance, Warfighter Overwatch has made a substantial financial impact, reinvesting over $700,000 into community programs that combat mental health challenges and provide crucial support to our nation's heroes, both first responders and veterans. Faun's story is not only one of personal strength and commitment, but also a powerful narrative of how visionary leadership can ignite change and offer hope to those who have served us all. Warfighter Overwatch's motto reflects Faun's personal values. We don't know them all, but we owe them all. Wow.
I'm impressed with myself.
Yes, you should be.
Jeez.
You should be.
No, thank you. That's that it feels like a surreal kind of having your bio read back to you and kind of sitting with the things that you've been able to accomplish in your life. So thank you for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What stands out to you when you do reflect on that?
You know, um, I think my journey with foster children and then adopting children out of the foster care system today is is a journey that I'm reflecting back on a lot. Um, and at different periods in your life, you will look back at different things. If you would have asked me 6 months ago, I may have been kind of looking back at maybe my journey with Danny and,
Mhm.
how I kind of helped him um, through his, you know, being diagnosed with a TBI, his post traumatic stress, those kinds of things. But I've really been reflecting a lot recently on my journey with my foster children, and then, of course, the children I adopted out of foster care. And so that I think has impacted me more than maybe I initially realized,
Mhm.
and something I'm working on processing right now. So, before we got started, I was telling you, my son is 16 and a half, and he's currently in his second residential treatment facility. So, you know, we're fortunate that California recognizes children adopted out of the foster care system have needs that may not be identified when they're young.
Mhm.
So, we're fortunate that we have support from adoptions assistance program to find a facility and pay for facility for him to be in. And that makes part of what we have to do easier, right?
Yeah.
But the emotional part of that has been difficult. The first round of residential treatment, he was gone from our home for 18 months. And then he came home for 6 months and then left again. And he's been there since April of last year. So almost a year.
Wow.
And so some of the things that he was dealing with were so heavy and really impacting everybody in the home. Initially, it felt a little bit like a relief that he was in a place where he
Mhm.
was supported, he was safe, um, but then also that we were not dealing with it on a daily basis. And I felt and I feel guilt about that, right? Like you don't want to necessarily be happy that your child is in residential treatment. So I did do some forgiveness for myself for feeling relieved that he was where he was. But,
Well, you want
also,
him to be safe,
right,
right? And you want him to be with people that
correct.
can
And that's what I had to come to the realization. I was like, look, I consider myself an expert in a lot of things, but this is not something that I was able to fix.
Mhm.
And so the best thing that I can do as a parent and a person is recognize my limitations and get him to the people who have expertise in the things that he's dealing with. And I have to remind myself that on a regular basis because it's really hard as a parent to
Mhm.
feel like you're incapable of supporting your child in the way in which he or she needs. So that was tough and continues to be tough from time to time.
I can only
Yeah.
imagine. I mean, our heart is
Yep.
with our kid, and
Absolutely.
whoever is struggling, that is
Yeah.
where our
Yeah.
mind, our attention, our everything is.
So he's recently been diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder,
Mhm.
which is
Very challenging and
very, very
mhm.
challenging, and some other things, conduct disorder, things like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So that's really difficult because initially, when I kind of engaged in this, residential treatment facility situation, and I thought, okay, well, we're gonna, we'll get him there, we'll get him with the people that can help him, and he'll get his treatment, and then he'll come home, and things will be better. Not perfect.
Mhm.
I don't have an expectation of perfection with any of
Mhm.
my children, but they'll be better. They'll be manageable. And so, what's really been hard is now almost a year into our second residential treatment facility, and I'm like really having to reframe what success
Mhm.
looks like in this
Mhm.
situation. And
And what the
that's really
future might
hard.
look like then.
Yep. And what
Mhm.
his future is going to look like,
Mhm.
what our families how we navigate this with him, right? Because he's going to be 17 in July. So we have about a year and a half or
Mhm.
so until he's 18, and adoptions assistance doesn't really support after 18.
Oh,
So we have like this ticking clock in the
yeah.
background as
Sense of
well.
pressure and
Yes,
time.
right. And I can't speed up his therapeutic process.
His healing.
Right. I can't do that.
Mhm.
Right. And so it's the, there's a lot in my personal life that I'm processing with my children. And I feel like it makes me a more empathetic executive director.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm able to really empathize with first responder families whose children are struggling, or veteran families whose children are struggling. So that's the upside of it.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah,
Having real life experience and being able to bring that to the table, especially when you're dealing, every family has
yeah,
things that they're dealing with. And
yeah.
so in this way, our challenges and traumas can be our gifts. But
Yes.
I also just think about you and supporting Danny. And I
Mhm.
mean, I can't, this is, I'm sure, not the only challenge with 20 kids that you've had in and out of your house. And
Yeah.
so I really applaud you for actually saying, I'm processing this. Like,
Yeah.
because I think there's probably, I'd love to hear from you, but I'm sure there's a lot of times where you didn't take the time to process for yourself because you were helping, serving, standing up for everybody else.
Most of the time I didn't, to
Yeah.
be really honest with you. I would say probably um in the past year and a half, I've really recognized that my um burying myself in work or helping others wasn't necessarily the best coping mechanism. Um, it really wasn't. I mean, it definitely fed a part of me that
Yeah.
needed to be fed, but I
Could have been
ignored it.
worse,
Could have been
maybe.
worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could have been at the bar.
Hmm.
But I recognize, and I'm willing to admit that I maybe didn't support myself in the way, or show up for
Hmm.
myself in the way in which I needed to show up for myself. So I'm working on that.
Hmm.
Part of my commitment to myself was joining your group.
Which so happy
Um,
to have you.
and I remember it being very intentional, saying,
Mhm.
I'm doing this for myself.
Yeah.
And so I'm proud of myself for that, because I don't know that I would have done that a year ago.
Hmm.
But I'm proud of myself, and I tend to be a verbal processor.
Hmm.
Sorry, Danny. So I when I have these, like, moments of realization, or something where I'm like, I've figured out, I verbally process it.
Yeah.
And so he's sitting there and he's listening to me, and I'm talking about how I am a couple chapters into the Mel Robbins Let Them book,
Oh.
and and I'm going to start letting them, and then
Hmm.
letting me,
Hmm.
right? And that I've joined your group, and really it's about
Yeah.
empowerment and connection, and all
Hmm.
of the things that I felt like I've let go of for myself. And he just looks at me and goes, I don't know where this came from, but I absolutely love it for you.
Oh,
So
I
I was
love that.
like, all right. So
Yeah.
I felt really supported and seen in that moment, and validated,
Yeah.
I'm doing the right thing. Cause Danny, for all of the struggles that he has endured in his life and in our life, I really, this is going to sound crazy, I really look at him as an example of self-care.
Mm.
Um which, if you would have met Danny 10 years ago, you'd have been like, he's the exact opposite of what you
Why?
should be doing. Well, because he wasn't doing self-care.
Hmm.
He absolutely was not. He was doing self-indulgence, right?
Hmm.
There's a big difference there.
Hmm.
And so watching him walk this journey of getting therapy, he still goes to
Hmm.
therapy every week,
It's great.
to kind of deal with the things that he's unpacking from early childhood, from combat trauma, all of those things. But he's realized how important it is to have a hobby,
Hmm.
something that I'm like, what is a hobby,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How important it is to feed yourself emotionally and
Hmm.
physically, right? So
Hmm.
I left house on my way here. He's working out,
It's great.
right? So I I look at him as somebody who has invested in himself and you can see it paying off. And it just took me a while to realize that I deserve that as well. And that what I was doing, although it filled a part of my soul and my heart, it wasn't self care.
Yeah. I mean, what a beautiful thing to give each other, though, to have that modeling for him. And kudos to him for doing that because it is hard to make that shift. What what allowed you to see it for you? Like, what do you think made Danny make that shift? And then how did you get to the point where you were in recognition? I could do better at the self care
Yeah.
thing. And I will just note before you answer that question, it was intentional because you wrote me at the beginning of this year just saying, "This is the year to take care of myself." This is some wording similar to
Yeah.
that. Like I am I am
Yeah.
serious, I am committed, and here we are, starting this year off exactly how you said.
Yeah. I know. I'm proud of myself. Follow
You
through.
should.
Danny talks a lot about his journey to better. And he says frequently, Fawn held space for me to do this.
Mhm.
And she took care of everything
Mhm.
so that I could do this. And she encourages me to, you know, to do the things that bring me joy, to do the hard work that I need to do to be better, and he gives me credit for all of this. And at some point I realized, yeah, but you're the one that actually did it, right?
Mhm.
Like you're the one that actually dug in, ripped off the scabs, went in, the emotional scabs, went in, cleaned them all out so that they would heal better, right?
Mhm.
You did that work. Yeah,
Mhm.
I made sure that there was dinner and that you didn't have to, whatever, mow the lawn or whatever, so you could do your processing and things like that. And then he's not the only person that I've done this for, right?
Mhm.
We've housed many of Danny's battle brothers at our
Yeah.
house and
Yeah.
helped them emotionally kind of journey through what they needed to do. And so I've been this person for numerous people. And then through my work with Warfighter, I've seen all of these success stories that
Mhm.
I've played a small part in, generally just connecting them with culturally competent trauma informed therapists,
That's a huge part.
which, yeah, it's a big part.
Yes.
And, helping to fund, but watching them that they're the ones doing the work. And
Mhm.
so at some point I said, okay, well, I found myself last fall stressed out, unhappy, and I was like going to bed every night discontent,
Mhm.
stressed about something. I mean, just full of, I don't know, angst and just unhappiness. And
Mhm.
over the holidays and things like that, I was like so sick of it. I was like, this
Yeah.
is not who I am. And so I had to do a lot of internal, like looking in. And I realized that I was creating it for myself.
Yeah.
And that was not easy. And so that was the first step.
Getting sick of yourself is a really good sign,
I
by the
was
way.
so
Like,
sick of
I'm so
myself.
sick of myself that I have to change, and then you
Yeah.
just evolve into the next version. It's a
And
beautiful place to be.
yeah, I'm like
Mhm.
shedding my skin. I'm like, okay, well,
Mhm.
if you're unhappy, you don't have anybody else but yourself to blame
Mhm.
for it.
Mhm.
So, and I can't tell you how many times I've said that to other people.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then I'm like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
maybe I should take my own advice. So here we are.
Mhm. Mhm.
So really it was that. It was just getting sick of myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So you did it.
I did it. I'm doing it. It's not perfect.
Mhm.
I still open up my laptop and work when I shouldn't,
Mhm.
but I'm working on getting better at those kinds of things
Mhm.
and putting myself first, not blaming myself for, things with my son. If something doesn't work out with my nonprofit,
Mhm.
doing things that bring me joy like um so I recently launched a boutique
Mhm.
and it does trucker hats and permanent jewelry and fun stuff like that. And let me tell you why I did that. Because I will turn down an invite to go out with my girlfriends every chance I get
Mm.
because I actually don't know why. So I haven't discovered that yet.
'Kay.
But this forces me in those situations
Yeah.
because I'm hosting these events, I'm hosting
Connecting.
these
Mhm.
parties.
Mhm.
So it forces me to connect. I haven't quite discovered why I'm doing that, like why I feel like I just want to stay home and
Mhm.
veg on the couch and watch something. But something Mel Robbins says in her book is that there's a situation where she got upset because her friends all went out and did something
Mhm.
without her. And she was upset with them, talking about how, how could they do this, whatever. And then she realized, well, it's because I never invite them out. I
Yeah.
never engage with them. And I was like, that's what I
Mhm.
do.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it's baby steps for me.
Yeah.
So now I'm hosting parties for people I don't know and getting to meet new people. So that's been fun. But it's just almost like an avenue for me to rediscover who I am
Yeah.
and what I like to do. So
To me, that's a deep sense of you really understanding who you are and
yeah.
acknowledging that you need to implement accountability to
Mm.
yourself to change.
Oh yeah.
I'm very much the same,
Yeah.
and I created the women's membership for many reasons. I mean, one, I really think women are errantly under believing that they are alone in their circumstances when we are all going through very much of the similar things. So I think
Correct.
that bringing people together to understand that is very important. I also think we can only do so much healing individually, and then community is where we show up with the work. Like it's
Mm.
easy to be understanding by yourself on a Friday night at home
Yep.
versus like understanding in a real conversation, right?
Mm.
And like in compassionate and forgiving and all the things. So, but I also know that it is, heart wide open is how do you live with your heart expanded and not shut it down? And so it's easy for all of us to go shut down. So,
Yeah.
but if you have something on your calendar that's like, I need to show up for these women, I've committed to this thing that I'm doing with them
Yep.
on these next 3 nights in a row or whatever it might be, you have to get over that and you
Yep.
have to go do that work. So to me, that's like a very strong way that you're honoring and holding
Yeah.
yourself accountable.
And every time I begrudgingly show up to something that I've tried to
Right?
talk myself out of
Yeah.
showing up to, I leave there and I was like, God, I'm so glad I went.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for whatever reason, it doesn't stop me from being upset about having to go to the next thing.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that. I think that it's a work in progress. But every time I leave, I'm like, gosh, I'm so glad I did this.
Yeah. But maybe that never changes. Maybe you
Maybe,
always have a little bit of like,
maybe I watch my husband, be genuinely excited about going out with his friends or golfing or whatever he's doing with his buddies, and I want that for myself.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think it's because he's gotten to a point in his life where he's able to realize that pouring into himself is the best way for him to serve others.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying it out loud, right?
Mhm.
I'm saying that that's where I want to be, because I believe that the more work I do on it, that I will not just say it verbally, but believe it emotionally. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something that's kind of coming up in a few places that, and ironically, it's something that you've shared with me before, which is importance of living with trauma, and it's
Mm.
it's relating living with challenge, right? Living with something being imperfect, and we're kind of touching on it a little bit
Yes.
personally. It's also with your son.
Yeah.
It's also with whoever has experienced TBI or PTSD. It's like it we don't get down to baseline of zero healing, right? There's always a level of it minimally of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if not higher, of distress.
Yeah.
So,
Everybody has something
mhm,
that they're living with, right?
mhm,
And so I think for me, recognizing that in other people and admitting it about myself,
mhm,
honestly, probably the biggest thing, right? So when I would, through my journey with my husband, who, just for those that aren't aware, my husband signed up on September 11th. He walked off his job. He was 19 years old, and he tried to call the Marines, but their phone was busy. Obviously, it was September 11th. The Army picked up.
mhm,
So he was in basic training a month later, and a year later, he was on his first deployment to Iraq. Is an overachiever, always will be an overachiever. So he was distinguished honor grad for basic training, AIT. He did Ranger indoctrination program, all these things, right? He says, which I find hilarious, that his first deployment was uh, 0304 in Iraq, and it was relatively uneventful. I'm like, hi, you're at war, but okay. And I think it's because 0506 was really brutal.
Comparatively.
Yeah, comparatively. They lost 9 guys that year, and then they lost 14 to suicide since coming home. My husband was almost one of them. So he has this trauma that he has um, needed to unpack and has carried with him a long time. And through my journey of watching him kind of unpack that, and then getting into early childhood trauma, right, and seeing that he is helping others, even if he's not fully healed, he's still able to help others with their trauma.
Oh, of course.
And it has been so amazing. And for me to be like, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect, Fawn. So when I go and tell somebody, a lot of times I was talking about Danny's trauma, right? And I would talk about what he's gone through and his trauma and where, what we've walked through, but in the sense that I was helping him. And I never took ownership of or talked about my own trauma in either the adoption situation, having a severely premature baby that almost didn't make it. That's traumatic. Or having a husband who really sometimes was completely unhinged because of his undiagnosed at the time, undiagnosed traumatic brain injury and severe post-traumatic stress. And so I never, it was probably in the past year that I realized that when I talked about trauma, I was never talking about it as it relates to myself. I was always talking about it as it relates to other people. And so, really trying to connect with that part of my trauma and the things that I've been through and I've personally experienced, I think was the beginning of me of cracking that sense of you have to be perfect. Am I coming on to talk about Danny and Danny's journey? Am I coming on to talk about, whatever other helping veterans and first responders through their trauma journeys and their spouses? And the answer was no. I was coming on to talk about myself. That may have been one of the first times where I sat in my own skin talking about myself and what I've been through. And, ever since then, I've begun to realize that I have trauma that I need to talk about, that I need to live with, that I need to sit with, that I need to accept, and then work through. And so I think there's a lot to be said for women who come to a realization that they don't have to be perfect and they can be scarred and they can still show up for themselves and other people, even with their scars. Yeah.
So I know some of the takeaways. Well, I know
Mhm.
everybody was incredibly inspired by that talk that you gave us, and just really being vulnerable to share
Yeah.
your side. I'm continually impressed that even today, you walk in and what's on your heart is what you want to share, and where you are in your journey is what's present. And I think some of that ability to be in the present moment and to be in that experience is what makes you so useful in the world.
Mhm. Thank you.
Could you also share a tad bit about how you did let people into your home and how kind of
Mm.
Warfighter actually
Yeah.
began? Because I really think it speaks to, how you just you do it is true. Entrepreneurialism is seeing a deep need and wanting to serve. I mean, one of the other things, just sidebar, is you refer to our
Yes.
trauma informed therapists who are able to serve
Yes.
veterans and first responders. So, and you're making a way for that to be provided financially for them
Yeah.
to be able to get there. I know you have some service dogs that you work
Yes.
with. I mean, you have all kinds of things. So maybe
Yeah.
we're gonna have you
So
back, but
obviously, you know, I talked a little bit about Danny's second deployment, right, to
Mhm,
Iraq and how difficult that was. And so, being a sergeant, being in charge, he felt responsible for his guys,
mhm.
as anybody would. So, after Danny and I got together and we started to kind of deal with some of the things that he was dealing with, and we were seeing the similar ripples across his unit. Um, we started to kind of get out in front and be like, hey guys, um, let's help you get to the connected with the VA. We started making friends in that industry, in that realm, right? And like, hey, we have more people that could use support. Where do we go to support them, right? So it kind of happened organically where we were just, I think just both individually have always kind of been leaders. And so because of that, we kind of jumped in the trenches and are like, okay, what can we do and how can we help? And some of it was self-serving because I'm here trying to guide my husband through
Mhm.
this, but we wanted to make sure that we could share what we learned with other
Mhm.
people. And so we started Warfighter Overwatch. I had worked prior to that at a number of different nonprofits and wasn't really happy with what I saw: overpriced executive directors, or overpaid, excuse me, executive directors, people spending money on things that they shouldn't have been spending money on. So
Mhm.
we wanted to do it differently. So everybody at our nonprofit is volunteer. I don't get a salary. Nobody gets a salary. Every dime we raise goes back into our programming. Our office space that we have is paid for by my for-profit businesses. So I have
Mhm.
multiple for-profit businesses. They pay for Warfighters,
Mhm.
office space,
Mhm.
things like
Mhm.
that. So ultimately, we had a number of Danny's battle brothers live with us off and on, while we kind of housed them, got them the benefits that they were entitled to, that they didn't know even where to start, and kind of ushered them out the door. We did that multiple times. And, it was really through our journey walking alongside these veterans who gave so much for our country, and we saw this need, and so we're like, okay, we can do better than what's being done, and we can really come from a place of understanding and empathy and build programs that make sense and address the needs that we are seeing. And so that's what we've done with Warfighter Overwatch. And then we were, obviously really excited to bring in the spousal support program,
Mhm.
which you've been a big part of, and because I personally understand what it's like to be a spouse.
Yeah.
And then we started to see all these correlations between the veteran and the first responder community. And so we opened up our programming to serve first responders in the same capacity.
Mhm.
And we've brought first responders on our board of directors so they can help, guide our programs to address the needs that aren't being met by the departments,
Mhm.
right? For not only the first responder, but their spouse and children too. So it's been a great journey. Warfighter Overwatch is in its fifth year now. We started in
Amazing.
2020.
Yeah.
And we're just growing. We have therapeutic canines placed within departments.
Mhm.
So, fire departments, or police departments, or even chaplaincies.
Mhm.
We fund the placement of these therapeutic canines. And that's been a really great success. People are understanding the difference that dogs can make within a department, for critical incident stress debriefs, just everyday stressors. So, that's been great being a part of that and watching
Yeah.
that program kind of flourish and grow. So, we are Warfighter Overwatch is committed to serving our first responders locally and nationally, and our veterans locally and nationally. And we're lean little board of directors, but we get in the trenches and do what we
Mhm.
can to support.
Mhm. You're mighty.
Yeah, yeah, small but mighty.
So from what is the resistance point with
Mm.
these people that are, where do they push back and where do they step towards help? Because you can offer so much,
Hmm.
but and especially with spouses too, because you can relate to that side.
Yeah, I would say the biggest um, pressure point that most first responders feel who are currently working, I'll address veterans differently, but first responders, is that they are worried that asking for help or getting help will somehow
Mhm.
affect their career path,
Mhm.
right? And this is nothing new. This
Mhm.
is this has
No,
been an age old, problem.
unfortunately,
Yeah,
yes.
unfortunately. And even when we see captains, chiefs, telling them, "Hey, this isn't gonna affect you negatively," whether they still are really, really nervous to ask for help.
Mhm.
So we've seen some movement in the right direction, but we still have that some of those old school mentalities, in smaller departments in particular,
Mhm.
where they're really holding on to that old school mentality of just like, we're going to go kind of drink our problems away
Yeah.
or some other unhealthy coping
Yeah.
mechanism.
Yeah.
We're making headway there, but that's definitely one of the push points. For veterans in particular, I would say the VA makes it incredibly difficult to navigate. They make it difficult to trust.
Mhm.
And so they feel overwhelmed before they get even started. And
Mhm.
again, a lot of the veterans we're dealing with are have post traumatic stress, and they have traumatic brain injury or concussive blast syndrome or something else. So their executive functioning skills
It
in general
is
are impaired.
compromised.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so then we're like, oh, fill out this
Mhm.
form,
Mhm.
and then fill out this form, and then go here and call this person. And so Warfighter Overwatch does a really good job of kind of cutting through that red tape.
Doing a lot for or
Yeah.
navigating
Yeah.
help. Mhm.
I cannot tell you, Hannah, how many veterans I have handheld, and I actually mean holding their
Yeah.
hand, walking them into Mather VA or McClellan or wherever, like literally by the hand, like, come with
Mhm.
me, getting them signed up, getting them their ID card. I mean, veterans have been out of the service for, a dozen years,
Yeah.
not in the VA system whatsoever. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, it just seems really overwhelming to me or whatever. So,
Yeah.
and sometimes I'm a really big proponent of
I mean,
meeting
that is
people.
crazy, but
Yeah.
I know it's true.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I have some veterans who really don't need the support, that level of support. Or maybe they have a spouse who's very engaged, and I can
Mhm.
kind of give them, here's what you need to
Mhm.
do.
Mhm.
But a vast majority of the veterans need that level of hand holding at least that I'm dealing with. And so we are really big proponents. Warfighter Overwatch, my board, we're really big proponents of meeting people where they're at.
Mhm.
And so we will show up for them, whether it's meeting them in the parking lot of Mather VA to help them navigate getting a ID card,
Yeah.
or I can't tell you how many late night phone calls I've had before CMP compensation and pension exams,
Mhm.
where I'm talking veterans off of a ledge because they are so nervous about going in and talking to an examiner so they
Mhm.
can get a rating about
Mhm.
their PTSD.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to make them cry. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to
Mhm.
tell them about, what I went through on my worst day. We have a great team, and everybody cares.
You have a great team.
Yeah, we do. And everybody cares and everybody's invested in the
Yeah.
mission. So,
Yeah. And we will make reference to everything where they
yeah.
can find you and
Yeah,
all because you
absolutely.
have so many different organizations and different aspects of helping that I know are probably grabbing a lot of people's attention and
Yeah.
so that they know how to get to you. Um, what advice would you have for spouses and that
Mm.
i- to support? And, maybe that's what advice would you give yourself
Yep.
even, you
I was
know?
just thinking that. I was like, well, 2025 is going to be spouse focused. It
Mhm.
really is, because that's where I'm at in my life.
Mhm.
Right. And so my advice is just don't put it off.
Yeah.
Don't put it off.
Mhm.
Don't make the mistake that I did, thinking that not showing up for yourself is allowing you to show up better for other people.
Mhm. Mhm.
I literally told myself that subconsciously,
Yeah.
that not showing up for myself makes more room for me to show up for other people. That is
It's
you're
the
lying to.
opposite.
It is. And I'm fully aware of that now.
Mhm.
And so my advice to spouses would be to invest in yourself, and to,
Mhm.
they this adage, they tell you in the airplane to put your own oxygen
Mhm.
mask on first,
Yeah.
right? Do you know how many spouses I have told that story to? Put your own oxygen. I wasn't doing it for myself. So now I am. And I
Mhm.
can really promise you that it does make a difference.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to try really hard this year to provide a space where spouses can do that, and support
Mhm.
in which to do that.
Yeah.
So watch out, 2025. It's all
Well,
about the spouses.
I love that
I
because that's
know.
an area that I love to help with
Yep.
too. So I
Yep.
know that we'll
Mhm.
collaborate on a few
Yes,
things.
absolutely.
So much of what I do is in recognition of you can only pour from a full cup. You can't
Yeah.
pour from an empty cup. And the unfortunate stigma of taking care of yourself is, I don't know, selfish or indulgent or whatever word, or just a waste of time or not
Yeah.
important or whatever somebody wants to put on it. it truly is the opposite, because the more filled up you are, the more you have to give, and to be just present without distraction of your own, like, needs or, like, insecurities or traumas. It's just to be able to come in that sense of being present, which actually is ironic because you still can be relatively
Mhm.
present even though you have been dealing with a lot of
Feeling
things.
deflated.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think that the more, there's something I've said, and I'm still kind of learning what this, how to understand this, but the more you take care of yourself in a way, the more you need to take care of yourself. And it's not that it's an insatiable thing. It's the more you take care of yourself, I believe, the more use you can be.
Yeah.
And so now you have to take bigger care of yourself to help a bigger volume of needs, right? So it just increases. It actually does not go away.
No, it doesn't. And I think for me the thing that I struggled with was, well, what does taking care of yourself mean?
Hmm.
What does that look like?
Yeah,
Because
very good question.
I'm taking care of myself when my kids are happy, right?
Hmm.
When I'm answering all my emails,
Hmm.
when I'm helping people. And I had to really come to this realization that I was lying to myself, number
Hmm.
1, that's not what taking care of yourself looks like.
Yeah.
Just because you've read all your emails,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what? No.
Yeah.
So I had to have and taking care of yourself is going to look different for everybody.
Everybody.
And so for me in particular, there was a point last year when I was like, I don't have any hobbies.
Mhm.
What? I don't have any
Yeah.
hobbies. I don't have anything I enjoy doing unless it's like, oh, let's go do something as a family. That's not a hobby.
Mm.
Okay. So I had to had a really hard conversation with myself. It's not that I don't love spending time with my
Mhm.
family. It's it's that's me creating an event or something to go do with my family isn't a hobby.
Yeah.
And that while it may feed a part of me, that's
Yeah.
not self-care necessarily. So I've had to walk myself out of some of these fallacies that I believed
Mhm.
about what self-care looked like
And listen to yourself a little
and
more
listen to myself.
intimately.
Right. And so I would encourage anybody that's listening to this to kind of think about what their self-care looks like because it's going to look different than mine.
Mhm.
Some people truly like going to get a pedicure or
Yeah.
manicure, that is self-care and
That's
that's
not to
so
me.
yeah, right?
Yes.
And I'm like, That's so great. If that's your
Yep.
self-care, then do it." Some
Yep.
people are like, "Okay, also not my self-care is running." Okay?
Yeah.
So, I know a girl on my board and that is her self-care. She
Yeah.
runs and I think she's insane,
Yep.
but it
Yes.
puts it higher than, well, I mean,
Yes.
almost anything. Like,
Yes.
she will create time in her day to go run
Yeah.
because it feeds her and that's
Yeah.
what she wants to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching all these other people doing these things, like running, I think is crazy, but that are self-care for them. And I'm like, but
And it can be or it could not be,
right.
depending on who you are.
Yep. And
Just the
I'm
same as
like,
the
so
pedicure.
what's
Yep.
mine?
Mhm.
And then I realized that I don't have any
Mhm.
avenues of self-care and taking care of other people isn't self-care, Fawn. No
Mhm.
matter how much you've tried to tell yourself that it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
So don't ask me what my self-care is because I'm still trying to discover it. I'm trying, but I'm trying.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest difference. I don't know right now what my self-care looks like. And I'm still on that journey to discovery, but what I do know is that what I was doing is not self-care.
Mhm.
And so it's my job to find what fulfills me. And I'm on that journey, and that's okay.
It's beautiful, and you
Yep.
will find it, and then it will change,
Yep.
right?
Yes. And they'll be like,
And
all
then you'll
right,
need
next.
something different,
Yeah.
and then
Mhm.
it'll, because that's the evolving, right?
Well, book club last night was self-care for
Yeah,
me,
that's great.
and so that was something that I would not have maybe done before.
Yeah,
And I went there feeling happy and left there feeling happy. And I said, okay, so this is what self-care feels like.
fantastic.
Yep.
Yes, we've added a book club to the membership, and
Yeah,
we went through a really great historical fiction book. This
we
next
did.
one, we have Mel Robbins,
I
though,
know.
then that'll
I
be
was so
great.
excited. I was like, no way.
I know, you were
This
already
is
reading it.
crazy.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it's a popular book right
Yeah.
now. So one ending question that we
Yes.
have is heart wide open. What does that mean to you to live with your heart wide open?
Mm. Well, today's answer is going to be about living with my heart wide open to myself. Okay.
Mhm.
And again, because I'm on this journey to self discovery and self love, and, you know, for me, it is not denying the things that you know you need as an individual that are healthy, of course,
Mhm.
and allowing yourself to say, what I'm doing is not working for me. Giving yourself that grace that you give everybody else, give it to yourself.
Mhm.
Allow yourself to change direction and change course without thinking that that is somehow a failure,
Mhm.
and really showing up for yourself with your heart wide open.
I love that.
So it's really, for me in this moment, it's about giving myself that grace. So,
Yeah. Grace feels like that defines it.
yep,
I don't know if you do
absolutely.
words of the year, but that
That is it. That's going to be my word this
yeah,
year. It's grace.
that's
So,
beautiful.
yeah.
I love that. Is there anything that you feel that is left unsaid, or do you?
No, I mean, I think, catch me next year.
Absolutely.
Let's
We
let's
will.
let's check in, let's check
Yeah.
in with me next year, and I can talk about what this journey of self-discovery looks like.
Yeah.
And I hope that I'm in a position to better help people because I've invested in myself.
Yeah.
And I think I've done a good job of guiding people. But I think I'm going to be even better at it once I've guided myself a little bit.
I know that will be
Yeah.
true. And I'm very honored to be with you along the journey to
Thank
see what
you.
happens.
Thanks
So,
for thanks for leading the way in some of these things for me, because I
aw.
really appreciate it. So,
Thanks for saying yes.
yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, we will list everything to get in
Okay.
contact with Fawn, all her organizations. We didn't even mention Kinetic Ink,
Oh gosh, the tattoo shop.
tattoo shop.
Yeah.
Go. You gotta say like a 1 second sentence on that.
First responder, veteran friendly tattoo shop. All of my tattoo artists are specially trained to tattoo people with post traumatic stress.
Incredible.
So,
I mean, that just gives you insight as to how many just needs she sees and
yeah.
fulfills.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you for joining us on the Heart Wide Open Wellness Podcast. We appreciate your time, energy, and attention. Whether you're watching or listening, please remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Stay up to date with us at heartwideopenwellness.com so you don't miss any upcoming events, offerings, or retreats. Until next time, keep your heart wide open.